So earlier we looked at Rawls' social contract argument, and I have to say that I don't find a key element in that argument very impressive, and I think a lot of people don't find it very impressive. And that was the argument for the difference principle that relied on the supposed rationality or unique rationality of the max-min strategy. So remember that Rawls argued that in the original position, behind a veil of ignorance, it would only be rational to adopt the max-min strategy, and that's why that's how he attempted to justify the difference principle. But it doesn't seem to me that that argument has any chance of success, because the max-min strategy, while it might be a strategy that you or I would choose, maybe, it's not the uniquely rational strategy. There are other strategies that one could adopt, including maximizing. You can't really stipulate that one of these strategies is the uniquely rational one. It's perfectly rational to adopt maximizing in those circumstances. I mean, rational in the sense that Rawls means it. And so one might adopt, in the state of nature, in the original position, one might adopt a maximizing strategy and reject the difference principle and come up with something completely different. And I can't see that Rawls' social contract argument has any way of really dealing with that problem. Okay, now unsurprisingly, many of Rawls' critics have focused on that very issue and said that he can't justify the difference principle for just this reason. But Rawls has a second argument, an argument that to my mind is much more powerful. It's an argument that is sometimes called the intuitive argument because it relies on the intuitions that we have. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode. Okay, and the argument goes like this. We tend to think that inequalities are justified if they're the result of some fair competition. So imagine that there's some desirable job that you and I both want. Let's say it's got great conditions and good pay and all of that, and you and I both want that job, and we go for it. We both go for it. We both apply for it, and I get it, and you don't. Okay, now the question is it fair that I get it and you don't? And we tend to think that it is fair as long as the competition for the job was fair. So, for example, if I got the job because I was, more intelligent than you perhaps, or more talented at the particular job requirements. So, let's just say it was a job that required lots of maths, doing lots of maths. If I'm just better at maths than you are, right, then that's a good reason why I got the job. That's fair. Okay, so now that's equality of opportunity. As long as we had an equal opportunity to apply for the job, then that's okay. We think that's fair. However, if equality of opportunity did not obtain, then we think that it's unfair. So, for example, if I got the job because I was a friend of someone on the appointments panel, right, then we would think it was unfair that I got the job and you didn't. Or if I got the job because I'm male and you're female, then we would think that that was unfair. If I got the job because I'm white and you're not, right, then that would be unfair. Or if I got the job because I went to the same school as the people on the appointments panel, or I got the job because my dad knows the dad of the person or whatever, right? These things are unfair. If they exist, then there wasn't equality of opportunity, and we think that this is unfair, and the inequality that would result from it, the fact that I've got a better job than you, I'm getting more money and so forth, we would regard those inequalities as unfair. Now, why would we regard it unfair if I got the job because I was white, or I got the job because I was male, or I got the job because I went to the same school? Why would we regard that as unfair? The answer is because we regard these qualities as morally irrelevant. Right? They're not morally relevant. They're morally irrelevant. So the fact that I'm male, that I'm white, that I went to a certain school, these things are not morally relevant. It's wrong to take them into account when making a moral assessment of what I deserve. So, so these things that are morally irrelevant, or as we tend to say, morally arbitrary, if the things that are morally arbitrary should be left out of the calculation, for example, whether to give me the job or not. Okay, so the resulting position is, we think, ordinarily we think that if the decision is made on the basis of race, sex, sexual orientation, these things, social background, then the decision is unfair. There wasn't fair equality of opportunity, and therefore the resulting inequality is unjust. But if the decision to give me the job was based on something like my greater intelligence, my greater, generally speaking, my greater talents, then there is fair equality of opportunity, and the resulting inequality is justified. Okay, now Rawls's insight here is to see that there's something wrong with this position. This position that we basically all accept, that's embedded in our society, there's something wrong with it. There's an inconsistency in this position that we haven't really seen through. I mean, again, think about what I talked about in some episodes ago, where I was talking about how we often are confused about what we actually believe. We often believe incoherent things, inconsistent things, and part of the job of philosophy is can be to point out to us that we have these inconsistent beliefs, and that's what Rawls is trying to do here. Okay, he says the position where I say, for example, that I'm white, that I'm male, that I went to a certain school, that's not acceptable to take that into account. But that I am more talented than you, that is acceptable to take into account. He says there's a problem with this view that we generally don't notice, but it can be brought out and revealed. And the problem is basically this. Remember that the reason that we weren't going to take into account race, gender, sexual orientation, and all that stuff is because we believe those things are morally arbitrary. But, says Rawls, my talent is just as morally arbitrary. I didn't deserve to be born with whatever talents I have, and you didn't deserve to be born with whatever talents you have either. That's just the way that we happen to have been born. That's just the luck of here's another slogan, the luck of the natural lottery. All right, the talents that we have are a result of the natural lottery, and we don't deserve them any more than we deserve anything else. Now, that doesn't mean we deserve not to have them, right? It means that we don't deserve any credit for them. It doesn't mean that they should be taken away or that we're bad people for having them or anything like that. It just means that we can't claim any credit for them. So just as, says Rawls, I can't claim any credit for being white, I don't get any moral credit for being white or for being a male, in exactly the same way, I can't claim any credit for my natural talents. That's just the way I was born. I don't deserve any credit for it. So when we say, if I got the job because I was white, then the resulting inequality is unjustified because being white is morally arbitrary, right? In exactly the same way, we could say that my getting the job because I'm more talented than you, more naturally talented than you, let's say more intelligent than you, right? For example, in our hypothetical case, I'm more intelligent than you, in our example, that doesn't justify the inequality either, because I didn't deserve to be more intelligent than you. I didn't do anything to deserve it. It's just the way I was born. It was just the result of the natural lottery. And so we can't justify the resulting inequality in this case any more than we could justify it in the case where I got the job because I was white. So what Rawls is pointing out here is that what we call equality of opportunity is not enough for our own sense of fairness. Our own sense of fairness requires that our position in life is not governed by things that we don't deserve credit for. well, I don't deserve credit for my natural talents, so my position in life can't be justified on the basis of my possession of those talents. So all those things like, intelligence, that would include things like not just, as they say, not just IQ, but what is it, EQ, emotional intelligence, and so on, people skills, hand-eye coordination. Think of people who earn a fortune from playing sport. And all these things, all the natural talents that people have that enable them to do well in life, the inequalities that result as a result of all of this are unjustified, according to Rawls, can't be justified by appealing to the possession of those natural talents, because the possession of those natural talents is itself unjustified. It is simply a result of the natural lottery. Okay, now this strikes me as an extremely powerful argument. Notice that we already accept half of, I need to point this out exactly how this works, but let me just say, we already half accept this argument, and Rawls is just trying to get us to accept the other half. So let me give you an example where I think we already accept the argument. So if I were to say to somebody, look, or imagine that the appointments panel said to me, or said to us, we're going to give you the job, Alan, because you're not disabled. But this other person who's applying for the job is disabled, right? That other person's in a wheelchair, and we're not going to give it to that person. Now, we would think that that was monstrous, right? Because it's not the disabled person's fault that they have this disability. Okay, so we think it monstrous where people try and give discredit to someone because they lack a certain talent, right? We think that's a terrible thing to do. But Rawls is trying to point out to us that the reverse is just as true. If it's monstrous to give people discredit because they lack a talent, it's just as wrong to give somebody credit because they have a talent, or it's just as inappropriate. I mean, it might not be as morally hideous to do it, but it's still inappropriate. So just as we shouldn't say you deserve less in life because you have a disability, we can't say you deserve more from life because you have an ability, right? Each of those is equally morally unsound. So as a result of this, there are two possibilities, not exactly both possible, but you'll see what I mean. The first thing that we could do is we could redistribute natural talent so that everyone was equally talented. But of course, we can't do that. We can't do that for a couple of reasons. One is we can't do it in the sense that it's actually impossible to do it. We don't have the technology to do it. The other reason is that we can't do it because it would violate the basic liberties principle. That's a point I need to come back to. But it would violate the basic liberties principle. So we can't do it because it would violate a more fundamental principle of justice to do it anyway. Okay, so we can't redistribute the natural talents. So what we can do is we can ensure that the benefits that arise because of the possession of natural talents are arranged so that they advantage everybody. Okay, so I'm allowed to, under Rawls' scheme, I am allowed to enjoy the benefit of my natural talents, but I have to do so in a way that benefits people at the bottom as well. Okay, now think of it this way. Imagine someone at the bottom of society with very few resources asking a wealthy person why their wealth is justified. What could the answer be? So let's just say now I'm really poor and I'm asking someone who's really wealthy why it's this inequality between us, this disparity of wealth between us is justified. Now that person might respond to me by saying, well, it's because I'm really talented at all these areas. I'm really intelligent, much more intelligent than you. I'm much more talented at doing this and that than you are, and so on. So intelligence, skill, ability, whatever. But, says Rawls, those natural talents are undeserved. They are product of the natural lottery. So even if this wealthy person is more intelligent than me, even if the wealthy person is more skillful than I am, even if the wealthy person has abilities that I don't have, they don't deserve to be more intelligent. That person doesn't deserve to be more intelligent. That person doesn't deserve to be more skillful or have abilities that I don't have. They don't deserve it any more than someone deserves to be born disabled or ugly or whatever. No, these people don't deserve any of that. And that undercuts the argument that they give in order to justify the inequality. Why then the focus on the least advantaged? Because, says Rawls, if the inequality cannot be shown to be to the benefit of the least advantaged, there is no reason why the least advantaged should accept it as justified. Okay, so let me just say that again. If the inequality cannot be shown to the If the inequality cannot be shown to be to the advantage of the least advantaged, then there is no reason why the least advantaged should accept the inequality. So in this way, the difference principle does get supported. It gets supported in essence by noticing that once we accept that our natural talents are undeserved, the justifications that we give for the inequalities that exist in society cannot function. We cannot argue that so-and-so deserves to be wealthy because they're talented, because they didn't deserve those talents. Right? It's true, of course, that people get wealthy they get wealthy for lots of reasons. Luck's got a lot to do with it. But it is true that people get wealthy because of talent. That's true. They get wealthy because of talent sometimes. But that doesn't justify their wealth. It doesn't justify the inequality that exists because the talent was unjustified. The possession of the talent was unjustified. And as I say, that seems to me to be an extremely powerful argument. Much more powerful than Rawls' sort of more official argument that he presents in the social contract argument. Okay, next episode we're going to talk about some criticisms of Rawls' view.